And you're essentially saying the riskiest thing for them is to take a job at a company instead of being an entrepreneur. Is that?
No, I don't think that's necessarily risky. The riskiest thing is to take a job at a very large company where almost certainly your growth is going to be slow because they're not going to give you a chance to fail. So if you're intentionally slowing your growth, especially as a young person, so a lot of young people, they actually go to some sort of place where they're intentionally slowing their growth. That is extremely risky. And that things could still work out, but you got to be really lucky for them to work out. The only thing you have going for you is to be investing in yourself massively and growing really, really, really quickly. And so you don't want to go to a place where your growth starts to slow pretty dramatically. And the only way for your growth to increase is by having a high likelihood of failure and by working on interesting projects with super interesting people where your pace is moving really fast. Probably it also means that you're working massive number of hours, right? So these are all the ways, and everyone around you is working massive hours. These are all the ways to increase your growth rate. And increasing growth rate is really, really, really important, especially when you're young.
And is the reason it's important is because it sets you on a different trajectory, essentially starts compounding.
Yeah, exactly. Your growth compounds at a very, very, very fast rate. And let's say the average 22-year-old is probably growing at 10% a year or something. If you just think of growth usually equal to income. So 7 years later, their income's roughly double what it was, right? That's great. That's fine. 10% a year is definitely nothing, there's nothing wrong with that. But, you could probably grow much, much, much faster, 30, 40, 50% a year, at least initially. And then afterwards, okay, at some point you can't grow that much as a percentage, but on an absolute basis, you could grow faster every year than you grew in the past. And that should be your goal. On an absolute basis, am I growing faster this year than I grew last year? On a percentage basis, it might be less, but on an absolute, it has to go up every single year.
Why do you think it's so hard for people to grasp that mindset? Because once again, my impression is the large majority of people in the world don't have that mindset. They're sort of happy with the 10% or less growth.
I don't know that. I don't think most people are optimizing for lots of things. If you're optimizing to be, if you're relatively smart and you want to be relatively wealthy, it's pretty easy to do. And the people who don't do it, I think, are just not optimizing for it. So I think, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. You can be extremely happy and have a very fulfilled life. You don't need tons of money. So I think everyone has a different optimization function that they're working on, and everyone's different.
How do you keep yourself growing every day, right? So you're now in the more absolute phase because you've had so much early growth. How do you keep yourself on an absolute basis continuing to grow?
I think it's extremely hard, and I struggle with it every day.
Are there any things you try to do to keep it up, though? Are there examples, heuristics, ideas, mindsets?
I think you have to be very mindful of it and be constantly trying to figure out how to do things differently. Otherwise, you're going to end up in some sort of local maxima. And that is the death of, where a lot of somewhat successful people end up, is in that spot. And so you really do not want to end up in that spot.
Do they end up in that spot because they've reached this local maximum where they're pretty happy, they've done most of it successful, they have a level of ego, people praise them for the things they've done in the past, and they kind of just give up on doing more, or they just...
If that's the case, I think that's fine, because then that's what they're optimizing for. So they've reached the place where they want to reach, but I think for some people that they're not satisfied with that. They want to keep growing. They just don't know necessarily how to do it, or they're constantly, as you get more successful, when you're younger and early in your career, you don't see very many good opportunities. And so the simple thing, heuristic, is to do the good opportunities instead of the bad opportunities, right? And you get relatively good at that. As you get more successful in life, all you see is good opportunities. You rarely see anything else. And if you just take those good opportunities, you're going to end up in a local maxima. So you have to be going for the great opportunities. Sometimes the great opportunities are disguised as bad opportunities. But you can't spend your time on the good things. and you get good things coming across. You could be on the board of, I don't know, Starbucks or something. Like that would be a good opportunity. Seems cool. I know that's going to be good for, I can brag to my friends I'm on the board of Starbucks, but like, are you really going to learn that much? Are you really going to grow? Is it really going to help you? So there's all these different things that people end up, doing. They take these like good opportunities and then they don't take the time to go after great things.